Well, welcome to the October 11th, 2019 meeting of CONA, the Sarasota County Council of Neighborhood Associations. I'm Kathy Benz, and I'm the president of CONA. We make videos of our meetings, and those videos go up on our website, usually within 24 hours. So you can let people know that those videos exist, and you can link to them. We have a lot of information on our website. You should really walk through it. We have several resource pages, and one of them initially links to the meeting topic of the month. And if we've got additional links, we put additional information on our resources that are listed. And you know, we've been focusing on water issues for about the last 8 or 9 months to a year. So we've built a pretty good library of resources there, so you ought to check it out. Our meeting announcements go out in a tree distribution. The representatives from the neighborhood associations that are sent to our meetings here or represent that organization receive our meeting announcements, and they distribute it out to theirs with the numbers of neighborhood associations in the county. You can imagine what a mailing list would be to try and reach everyone. And if you do want a meeting announcement and you're not getting it, please let me know, however. Our membership season is closing now for this year, but we still have some invoices over there. If your association hasn't paid its dues yet, take an invoice and give it to your treasurer in order to submit it for us, please. And there's a link on the website too if you need it. The next meetings for CONA will begin next month now. We have had to postpone the anniversary party, so take that off of your calendar if you have it on. And we don't have a date certain for rescheduling yet. We'll have to contact people individually. November 8th, we'll be having Tom Matrullo talking about the Board of County Commissioners' decision on celery fields, hopefully, and also the Rural Heritage proposal for the comprehensive plan. On December 13, we'll have neighborhood concerns about short-term rentals. And I think that a lot of people in a lot of neighborhoods are seeing the issue becoming problematic and would like to have some discussion of that. And on January, it's going to be 2020, people. We're going to be having Ready for 100% here. And that's a good segue into introducing Lynn Nielsen in order to come up and talk for a couple minutes about that.
Thanks, Kathy. So who here knows about Ready for 100? And who here knows what it means? Francis, what does it mean?
We need a video. Make sure
I'll turn it on. Brilliant. Hi. Hi. Got me?
Yep.
All right. So Ready for 100 means that we're trying to raise awareness of people and communities and governments to switch over to solar eventually, so that we can kind of lower the cost of survival. All right, it means fewer doctor bills because you don't have to breathe what's on the street.
Get the hook out.
Thank you. Thank you. That was excellent. So it was a campaign started in 2016 by the National Sierra Club to address the inaction at the federal and state level on climate change. realizing that grassroots efforts, citizens like you and I getting together and asking their city or county commissions to commit to going 100% clean, renewable with their energy sources. And so in 2017, there were a number of us working on climate issues locally, people in this very room here that worked side by side with me on this, collected over 2,500 petitions. We met with all the city commissioners, and we presented to them in June of 2017, and they unanimously passed a resolution that by 2045, the entire community will be 100% renewable, and by 2030, the city will be 50%, right, yes. So we are, in the city is well on its way to, working towards that goal, and we as a volunteer citizen organization are still working on different things in the community to help the city achieve that goal, and hopefully the county will too eventually. So if you're interested to learn more about what we're doing, we meet once a month. You can see me afterwards, or there's a sign up over there. And also we do presentations, like 20-minute presentation, and then information about how you personally can take action. So if you belong to a homeowners association or a nonprofit or other group, we will come out and give a talk. Just let me know about that, and I'll be happy to do that as well. So thank you.
Back here,
Sean, yeah. So I co-organized this with Sean Sellers, and he'll be back here in June 2020. January. To give you all more information about what we're doing. But if you can't wait till then, come see me.
Tom Petrillo.
Thanks, Kathy. I'll be brief, but at this time next month we might have a decision from the board on the fate of the salary fields. And I just wanted to make you aware of this. They've scheduled a meeting for November 6th when they're going to consider a plan that they created, which would perhaps, more than perhaps, probably enable them to rezone public land near the salary fields for industry. Many of you probably are familiar with the story. Jim Gabbard came back January 2017 and asked to put a waste processing facility next to the celery fields. As you can imagine, the community was not thrilled. They came out in force, the community, in August 2017 and told the board where to go with that idea. And the board turned Mr. Gabbard down. But it did not change the potential rezoning of the public lands. That means at any time anybody could come in, propose industry, and the board could approve it. It's vulnerable. We will know more after November 6th about how vulnerable it is. But just so you're aware, if you've got nothing better to do, come out November 6th and support your community. We have been doing this for close to 3 years now. I have never met anyone in this community who thinks a waste processing facility or other industry is a good idea next to the fabulous birding and recreational area we call the celery fields. And yet, there are two people in this community who like that idea very much. And for some reason, our board is listening to them. So, November 2nd, we're having a little kind of peaceful rally out at the quad parcels, Apex and Palmer Boulevard, which is where the public land is. If you have nothing better to do, come out at 10 o'clock Saturday morning, November 2nd, and learn more about this and get yourself excited about this issue because people still care. So I hope to see you then. Thank you.
Thanks.
And Tom will be reporting on that commission meeting on November 8th here. I'd like to recognize in the audience Northport Commissioner Jill Luke and Deputy Sheriff Kurt Hoffman.
Hey, everybody.
And I'm looking around to see if we've got other officials who would like to be recognized. Okay.
You're not standing up.
Okay. I'm going to move then into the major part of our program, which is sea level and climate change planning. And I've gathered together here representatives from every single local government. The only person who had a problem, Venice is not going to be represented, unfortunately, because CONA changed the date of the meeting. And Jeff Shum, who was originally scheduled to be here representing Venice, had a conflict that he couldn't resolve. So unfortunately, they're not here. But other than that, we've got people sitting up here to discuss this topic with you from every single one of the local governments. Plus, we've got people from additional organizations to give us some input. Now, if you've got any question that occurs to you during the presentation, raise your hand and somebody will give you an index card and a pen at the same time. And once you've filled out your question, if you'll raise your hand again, somebody will come and get it. And then I organize them, I group them together so we don't have repetitious questions, and I filter out the mean and nasty ones. But I think that that works very well, and I've only had one person ever object to my sifting them down. But the important thing is we videotape, and that way when I read the question, it gets onto the videotape, whereas somebody saying something from the audience doesn't get onto our tape, and that's really important to us. We get as many as 400 viewings of our videos. We're very pleased with that because a lot of people can't get to our meetings and really want to hear the information that we're providing. So it's been a very effective tool. Now, the people we're having here in this forum tonight, I'm just going to briefly tell you who they are, alphabetically, initially. Carolyn Brown from the town of Longboat Key. She's the Director of Support Services. You want to raise your hand? And that way people know who you are. Lee Hayes Byron, who's the Director of Sarasota County-University of Florida IFAS Extension and Sustainability. Stevie Freeman-Montes, who's the Sustainability Manager of the City of Sarasota. Molly Holland, who's the Coordinator of Neighborhood Environmental Stewardship Team, abbreviated as NEST, who's with Sarasota Stormwater County. And Jerry Traverso, who's an engineer with the City of Northport. Elizabeth Wong, who's the Stormwater Manager with the City of Northport. And Darcy Young, who's the Director of Planning and Communications with the Sarasota Bay Estuary Program. And now I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go down and give each one of our speakers tonight 5 minutes to tell you what their role is and what they would like to communicate. And then when they have finished, I will ask questions of them. And then we will have a Q&A. So that means, Lee, you go first. There you go.
Good evening. I'm Lee Hayes Byron with Sarasota County Extension and Sustainability. Thanks so much for having this tonight. It's really great to have all the jurisdictions represented. I know Venice wanted to be here too. So at Sarasota County, we work on climate change in 2 different categories. Adaptation is planning for the impacts of climate change in the future, and mitigation is attempting to reduce the scale of those impacts by reducing our emissions and sequestering carbon to try to avoid the most extreme of the potential impacts. So I'll start with adaptation because I think that's the primary focus tonight. In our 2016 update of our comprehensive plan, we added a policy related to sea level rise, and that policy has the county considering sea level rise in our own infrastructure, encouraging planning for this around the community, sharing information between jurisdictions, and also collaborating within the region. The post-disaster redevelopment plan was developed before that, so that was really our first point where it was officially added to address sea level rise. And in there it talks about sea level rise impacts and precipitation changes, particularly from an emergency management post-disaster consideration. We are also working on an infrastructure assessment for our own assets, Sarasota County operational assets related to sea level rise vulnerability. And I'll let you talk about the but really our major focus for over a decade has been on the mitigation side of climate change. So yeah, we definitely want to prepare for the impacts, but I really would prefer to work hard now to decrease our local contribution to global emissions. So we've been working on that. There's a lot that can be done, and everyone can really make a difference. I did a class just this week that was based on the book Drawdown that I have if you're interested. It's the top 100 solutions to climate change, and it's in all different categories. It's really a very approachable and a hopeful book that I think is a good way to think about it. So the class goes through that, and everyone was really excited to talk about what they actually can do to make a difference. Sarasota County's sustainability program started by looking internally. We have a green building policy, we have energy efficiency targets, and we also have electric vehicle charging stations at 16 locations with 24 ports. And then we took that success and those examples and try to encourage the community to do a lot of that as well. And I think I'll stop there and I can talk more about the mitigation stuff later.
Molly's next.
Hi, good evening once again. Thanks for having us here. And so I'm just a very small part, or a very small portion in the stormwater section. And, pretty much a lot of what Lee Hayes said is mitigation and trying to adapt to the changes that we're having. But I take it from the internal aspect of what can we do as the county to alleviate some of the problems. And I go out to homeowners and homeowners associations and I ask you to help. Because quite frankly, Sarasota County does not own a lot of property in Sarasota County. You guys do. And so it's very important for you to be on board to help us help you. And so one of those things is coming out to your community, asking you, to make some subtle changes to ease the effect, or, for lack of a better word, cool the burn of climate change. And come out to your community. We talk a lot about best management practices that you may do in your community. Lee Hayes' group at University of Florida Ag Extension, we collaborate, we come up with a lot of plans, we tell you a lot of stories, we make up a lot of things, and try to get you on board once again to help us approach this as a holistic, not as so the folks can sit back and say, what can you do for me, but what can we do together? And so that is my role with Sarasota County.
Then we go to Steve.
Good evening. I could talk about this issue for probably many hours. I'm very passionate about it. And so again, my name is Stevie Freeman-Montes. I work as the sustainability manager in the city manager's office at the city of Sarasota. And really a lot of our work falls also in the two categories that Lee Hayes mentioned of mitigation and adaptation. But our climate adaptation work is probably what I'll talk about mostly this evening. And it really started in 2016 when the city of Sarasota used some of our Deepwater Horizon local claim funds, some of our BP oil spill funds that came directly to the city. A very small portion was decided to be used for a very detailed climate change vulnerability assessment and adaptation plan. And so we really started looking at climate issues as a staff. We formed a big committee of our wastewater engineers, our stormwater engineers, transportation engineers, people who work with city-owned assets. And we went through about a 1.5 year long process. And we have former City Commissioner Susan Chapman's here, who I'm sure could remember the painful days of going through this process together. But essentially, we looked at sea level rise, storm surge, extreme rain events, and heat, and adopted projections based on local information that we were going to use throughout our climate vulnerability assessment. Then we inventoried 220 city-owned assets within our transportation, stormwater, emergency operations, public lands, and shorelines. I feel like I'm missing a sector in there too. But 220 really specific assets, and we identified where we were vulnerable. And we prioritize those vulnerabilities based on a real quantitative score that we went through, and we got a lot of public input throughout the process as well. And there's 80 infrastructure points or assets that the city has deemed highly vulnerable that we really need to adapt sooner rather than later. And so those priority infrastructure, we kind of took to the next step and indicated high-level adaptation solutions for them. And since this was unanimously, this is kind of my Bible here, the Climate Adaptation Plan as a hard copy. Since we completed that in January 2018, I believe it was unanimously adopted. We've just been in full implementation mode and trying to make sure that we integrate with a lot of organizations such as Department of Transportation that does a lot of the roadways that they own, but we have to make sure, since it impacts the city so much, that we integrate a lot of our findings and our priorities into their planning processes, and that's a whole issue in of itself. But in short, we've done a lot of work around it. We're using NOAA's 2017 sea level rise projections, which project for our area about 1 to 1.5 feet of sea level rise when compared to 2017 sea levels. And that's a local projection based on a tidal gauge that's very close to us in St. Petersburg. In St. Petersburg, we've had a tidal gauge taking sea level readings since 1945. And so we know that the rate of change in St. Petersburg in our local waters since 1945, just observable data has been around 8 inches. So the projections for the future take into account the local rate of change that is being observed there at that tidal gauge or that sea level marker reading. So there's a lot of work in there, and hopefully I'll get a chance to talk about our mitigation aspect, but I'm probably close to my 5 minutes, but thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm your interloper for the evening. Thank you for welcoming the Estuary Program to participate on this panel. The Sarasota Bay Estuary Program, I'm wondering how many people in this room know who we are or have heard of us before. Okay, excellent. So that's about half and half. That's more than I usually get, which is great. So we're an intergovernmental partnership dedicated to restoring Sarasota Bay. Fairly simple. I should tell you who I am again. My name's Darcy Young. I'm the Director of Planning and Communications for the Estuary Program. So we work with federal, state, and local partners to, I'm sorry, is that still on? Yeah, okay.
Sort of tilted.
We work with our federal, state, and local partners to improve water quality, increase wildlife habitat, and increase public understanding of environmental issues, basically. We're one of 28 national estuary programs around the country, so we're actually a program of the Environmental Protection Agency. We have programs from Washington, the state of Washington, all the way down to San Juan, Puerto Rico. So we operate around the country and we all work together on many of these issues, but we're also very heavily locally based.
How many are there?
We have 28 around the country, yeah. So we actually have 4 right here in Florida. We're lucky in this area. We have the Tampa Bay Estuary Program just north of us and the Charlotte Harbor, they're now called the Coastal and Heartland National Estuary Partnership, to our south. So we've got a lot of work going on in this region to improve those estuaries, which is wonderful. So in terms of our climate work, when the Estuary Program got started 30 years ago, this year we got started in 1989, we were tasked with coming up with what we called a framework for action for improving Sarasota Bay. And I should tell you, we work from about Palmasola Bay down to the Venice Inlet, so we've got about a 35-mile area that we work in. So the framework for action was essentially meant to diagnose Sarasota area bays and talk about the challenges that we have for improving our bays. So, there were a suite of challenges we came up with, including habitat loss, polluted stormwater runoff, wastewater issues, all those sorts of things. And I'm happy to say there's been a lot of progress on those issues, in the past 30 years. But what I want to tell you about in terms of a climate sense, there is an entire chapter in that document, which came out in 1992, that was about sea level rise projections for this region. So I think that, to my knowledge, that was one of the earliest times that, sea level rise projections were kind of brought up in local planning and brought to a policy level. Since then, our climate-related work has really focused on nature-based climate solutions. So we're talking about ways that we can harness the power of nature and ecosystem services to help us both adapt to and mitigate climate change. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in my later questions. But basically, we help our partners do habitat restoration. So we're trying to take degraded areas and plant native plants, and that not only takes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, sequesters it in plants and soil, it also helps with things like reducing flooding and providing shade in urban areas and decreasing the urban heat island effect. A couple other things I want to mention. We have a document on that table back there that you're welcome to take. It's the one that says sea level rise on it in big type. We produced that first in about 2014 with the Moat Marine Policy Institute and EPA as an accompaniment to a sea level rise viewer that we have on our website. So it's an interactive viewer where the public can go on and take a look at where sea level rise is projected to happen in our region. And then, keep it up? Oh, I'm sorry. And then finally, 2 years ago, we went through a similar process to the city of Sarasota with what we call our comprehensive conservation and management plan for Sarasota Bay, which is a community plan with all of our partners for the actions that we would like to take to improve Sarasota Bay. And we did a vulnerability assessment of that plan. So we took what we knew about climate change impacts, what we thought was coming our way, and we took a look at those, and then we looked at our goals in our comprehensive conservation and management plan for the Bay and tried to figure out if any of those climate change impacts would make it totally impossible for us to reach those goals of water quality improvement or increasing wildlife habitat. So we're taking what we learned from that process, and we're actually rewriting our management plan right now. And that is in partnership with a lot of the people on this panel. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
I also wanted to ask anyone that didn't sign in on your way out, please to sign up on our sign-in sheets. And Elizabeth Wong is next.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Wong. I'm the stormwater manager for the city, and I also do a lot of environmental work for the city. Up Northport, thank you. We're a little bit lucky in that we are not fronting oceanfront that much. So, however, we still care about the environment because we are part of this whole area, and what we do affect people downstream. Right, water flows downstream. So, I do a lot of development review, and in 2010, we revised all our regulations. And in 2010, I was very happy to be able to rewrite our stormwater regulations to include a very vital thing called low-impact development. Low-impact development methods is a requirement for developers to evaluate to the maximum extent practicable. What that means is low development is anything that is to preserve the environment, get the water back into the ground when it rains rather than flowing around and flooding everybody, get the water quality treatment that's needed when it's in the undeveloped stage. You know, after you develop, you want to control all those pollutants. So things such as low impact